Thank you for coming out on this chilly but bright spring morning. I'm Joanne Runge, and on behalf of the Planning Committee, I welcome you to the bucket courses. Please take this opportunity to silence your cell phone if you haven't already done so. And you will notice on your table you have a couple of forms this morning, along with JR's handouts. The lavender form is registration for George Drake's course, which begins 2 weeks from today. If you register today, you will be assured to have a spot, and you don't need to register anywhere else then. Don't return Jim's email or register at Mayflower or at the library. You will be all set. And we've heard from some people who are down south for the winter that they're coming back early to get into hear George's class. So this is a good opportunity for you to get first in line. Also, you have this peach colored sheet, and this is your opportunity to give any comments or suggestions that you have about not only JR's course, but bucket courses in general. It's not required, but if you have something you would like the Planning Committee to know, this is your opportunity to let us know about it. So please fill these out, and you can just leave these on the table when you leave this morning. Well, this is the third and last class of JR's course, Finding the Truth. We appreciate your very faithful attendance to this, and it's good to see a room full enjoying JR's course so much. This today is the class you've been waiting for. He's going to talk about sex and religion. I want you to play nice. But happy to present again Dr. J.R. Paulson and Finding the Truth. J.R.
Thank you very much, Joanne. Can you hear me in the back okay? Jack? Judy? Okay? A couple handouts I've got for you. Per request, we have a bibliography on there, and the last book Lola told me about, and that's on there about ignorance, how it drives science. We've got the polls here comparing you. I spelled poll wrong, but you'll still get it. Don't have a spell check in my brain, but comparing how you folks did with the Pew survey. And we'll see if that's different at the end of the class today. The other side, you can go to sleep now or leave, because I tried to make the summary points here. But try to look at those at the end of today. But these are the things that 24 different points that I tried to get across. And I'll refer to the other handout a couple places in here. To show how relevant this is, I went into Jimmy John's last week and had a sandwich, and this was on one of the walls with a picture of a brain. Anybody see that? Yeah. Well, if you go to Jimmy John's, you'll see this. So just read it real fast. Don't slow down, just read it fast. And I think you'll see that it makes the point that I made in the first lecture about how our brain and our body looks for design, looks for pattern, and will find it, even if it's discombobulated in different forms. Our brain knows what it wants to, it's already got this pre-thing. So I don't know about you, but I don't have any trouble reading that. That's good, because my texting looks like that. The letters are all off and whatever, so this is good. A little poem by Ogden Nash. I thought was apropos. Theme of the course. I decided what this course was going to be about today. So I got out my pen and started to draw, and that's me, and I'm thinking about the world and trying to figure out, we need somebody else's perspective, and history's important, and I got all these tools to look at the universe, and what's that, and critical thinking, and anyways, this is, you see I'm not very right brain when it comes to art. Remember, for this class, the truth has no agenda. Repeat this from the first course. Leave those who are seeking the truth, doubt those who find it. Words of wisdom. Oscar Wilde. As we will find out. Remember our truth-o-meter from the first class? Yeah. Half-truths, lies, pants on fire, and everything in between. We started at the very beginning, about 5 classes ago, talking about the 4 basic types of truth or classes that I categorize. Those that have to do with the observation experiment in the real world, formal or logical truths that have to do with philosophy and logic, have nothing to do with the world out there. You either have logical thinking or you don't. Ethical or ideal truth. We'll talk a little bit about that today. And metaphysical or transcendental truth. We've talked about that a lot in the course here today and in the past about these areas that, oh, that's out there, that's not in science, that's metaphysical. And we've tried to bring and show that most of those metaphysical questions or ideas are really not metaphysical. We're trying to move all of us, wherever we are on this thinking ladder, up to our accomplished thinking skills. Remember, we have to get rid of these biases. It's true because I believe it. It's true because we believe it. The group, it's true because I want to believe it. Innate wish fulfillment, it's true because I've always believed it. And it's true because in my selfish interest to believe it. What process have we humans created to help overcome these biases? The answer is science. More specifically, the scientific approach. We need this as one of our primary tools in our truth toolbox. It's only science and mathematics that can help us sort out true cause and effect. It's through the methods of science that we can begin to distinguish real patterns in the world from apparent ones. It's through science that we can distinguish type 1 errors, false positive. Remember our primate back on the savannah? Here's rustling. Is it a tiger or is it just the wind? Makes a big difference which way he chooses. It's false positive or false negative. Science can help us distinguish that. The null hypothesis. Definition: the hypothesis under investigation is not true or null until proven otherwise. X does not cause Y. If you think X does cause Y, then the burden of proof is on you to provide convincing evidence or experimental data to reject the null hypothesis. Most people do not understand this. They do not understand science, that this is at the core of science. Science does matter. How much evidence do you need? A lot. We generally use a statistical standard of proof that would require at least 95 to 99% confidence that the results were not due to chance before we would offer our provisional assent that the effect may be real. We don't just say it gets this number and it's automatically true. It's just a start. The result should be confirmed or reconfirmed by repeated testing, and just as importantly, by others. So we don't accept science. I found this. Remember when over there, not too recently, they found this particle that exceeded the speed of light, and everybody was going nuts. Physics was going to fall apart. Einstein was wrong. You don't hear about that now, do you? They did not duplicate that experiment and found there were maybe some errors in there. They could have, but that one person finding something does not do it. Experiments are designed to be as free of bias as possible. Terms like double-blind, randomized controlled, placebo-controlled trials are used to help prevent prejudicing the data. Example, drug trials. I talked in my Overdose America how drug companies do trials. They choose the patients, they choose the methods, they choose the doctors, and they choose the results to print, and they put the spin on the print. Studies on drugs done to find out does this drug work or not, done by independent, the NIH, or maybe a university that has no biases in there, is much more likely to come to different conclusions. However, all scientists are human, and their brains are subject to the same irrational and biased thinking that the rest of us are. It's just that in addition to being well-trained in the scientific method, they must also be held to that higher standard by their peers. Well, let me give a few examples of science or scientists gone awry. Talk about Galileo, Einstein, Hubble Space Telescope, medicine, Columbus, and Darwin. Galileo and the confirmation bias, Jupiter and Saturn. As you recall, Galileo, when he took the telescope and he looked at up in the sky and he looked at Jupiter and he saw Jupiter and he saw these little 4 dots, little moons. He said, that's, wow. And then he'd look at the next night and the next night and saw that those little moons went around the planet. Well, if the Earth is the center of the universe and everything goes around the Earth, it kind of shoots the theory of astronomy, which had been passed down for centuries from Aristotle, and it goes against the church and the church doctrine. So you got 2 big biases here that have been around for a long time to create a lot of weight. But he said, no, I've seen these 4 moons are going around. So he goes and gets some of his buddies. Caesar Serenini says, look at my telescope, I've seen this wonderful discovery. He wouldn't even look through you can't. He wouldn't even look through his telescope. That's how strong his prejudice and bias was. Another of his colleague, who did say, I looked through the instrument, I tested the instrument of Galileo's in 1,000 ways. Below, meaning looking at the ground terrestrially, it works wonderfully. In the sky, it deceives. I have as witnesses most excellent men and noble doctors, and all have admitted the instrument to deceive. So this guy is looking through there, seeing that, this is deceiving. Power of belief. The fellow math professor thought Galileo put the 4 moons inside the telescope. He thought he painted them in there.
Oh my. Oh boy.
Strength of power of belief. Now, here's Galileo, and you're going, well, Galileo's pretty smart. He's discovered this. He's outside the paradigm. He can independently think. No. What about Saturn? So Galileo puts a telescope on Saturn. And if you look through a telescope like me, what do you see around Saturn? A ring. But there were no rings ever that anybody knew about. There was no concept of anything with rings around it. Everything was supposed to be perfect and round. And so Galileo, here he is. And this is from his original work. And translated, the shape of Saturn is, here's a star, a bigger star, another star, 3 circles, is shown by perfect vision and perfect instruments, but appears thus where perfection is lacking, the shape and distinction of the 3 stars being imperfectly seen. So he looks at Saturn, but his mind will not allow him to believe that that's a ring. No, it's 3 stars. It's 3 stars. So here's Galileo. He can't get out of the paradigm. What did I tell you? Your brain looks at reality and then bases reality on what your already preconceived ideas. Einstein, the ultimate fudge factor. I don't know about you guys, but I think Einstein was probably one of the smartest people around, right?
Yeah.
I mean, brilliant. Well, he said, I made this big boo-boo, my greatest mistake, and it's called the cosmological constant. Okay, see that big equation there? That's part of his field theory of general relativity. And let me try to simplify this. This formula is supposed to tell you what the whole universe is like and what the whole universe is doing. That's pretty good. So you got gravity and you got mass, and what is the universe doing? Well, at Galileo's time, the universe was felt to be static. We just believed the universe was our Milky Way, and everything is just in our Milky Way and it's going around, but everything is static. So the universe is no ideas of expanding or big bangs or anything like that. It's a static universe. So he comes up with this equation, but there's a problem. There's an equal sign. All of us remember from math, this has got to equal that, but it don't. It doesn't. So Einstein says, I'm going to put this lambda in here. This is the fudge factor. He doesn't call it. I'm going to put this lambda in here, and I'm going to give it just the right value so these 2 balance. I'm going to call it the cosmological constant. And he did. Well, what happened about 5, 10, 15 years later? Edwin Hubble decided that, gee, these other galaxies are going away from us. We live in an expanding universe. It's not static. So that's no longer, that fudge factor didn't even need it because it's expanding. Fast forward almost 100 years, now what have we discovered? Yes, the universe is expanding, but faster than we thought. And what do we call it? And what did we discover? Dark matter. So now dark matter explains why, because before, see, if you had all these galaxies and planets there, they all got gravity, right? The big G, gravity. They should all pull together into a, I mean, why? So there had to be this force that is pushing stuff away to balance the universe from collapsing on itself, because you got all this matter. Well, we know it's dark energy now, and that formula with the cosmological constant now, Einstein's was kind of almost right. But you see at his time how he even fudged the results.
Oh, that's good.
Broken telescope, science and politics. The Hubble Space Telescope was launched aboard the shuttle Discovery in April 1990. But when it was in orbit, they found out it's out of focus. The stupid mirror doesn't work. This is $2.5 billion project. $2.5 billion, and you get it up there and it doesn't work. So NASA decides, let's check it out. And Richard Weeks dropped this off to my office a couple months ago, said, JR, I thought you might be interested in this. This was the NASA report of analyzing what happened, how could they blow this, what went wrong. And conclusion, reliance on a single test method was a process which was clearly vulnerable to simple error. They just tested one test. During the critical time period, there's great concern about cost. Oh, how much is this costing us? And a schedule, we gotta get that on, because we got the launch coming up in 4 months. We gotta get this thing done. They knew, they said the most unfortunate aspect of the failure is that the data revealing these errors were available during the fabrication process, but were not recognized and fully investigated at the time. Reviews were inadequate, both internal and externally. And this is the key, competitive, organizational, cost, and schedule pressures were all factors in limiting full exposure of all the test information to qualified reviewers. So even though science tells you what you should do, follow your methods, repeat the stuff, they tried to take shortcuts. And that's what happened. So politics and science do interact. In other words, you see how it was driven by the, let's get this thing done and get that out of there. We talk a lot on the right, how the people, oh, the idiots on the right, they don't understand science, they global warming stuff. But I'm telling you, if you're listening, pay attention to class, that there are also people on the other extreme that global warming or certain environmental things, they choose, cherry pick the facts they want to show their. And then another data comes in, oh, no, we want to ignore that because it doesn't support our belief in, for example, global warming, other things like this. So politics does have an effect on science, what's funded, and just making you aware of that, if you weren't already. The greenback bias. I added this to the list from last time. This was not on your list of biases. Remember all the biases we have? Definition, the tendency to think, believe, and act in a way that maximizes one's personal wealth, even at the expense of others' loss of rationality. Very ubiquitous, especially in Washington and other places. Combined with about another dozen biases, clearly show why our political system is so dysfunctional. You agree? The lobbying and the status quo bias and why didn't you get elected again is just... Evidence-based medicine, the new paradigm. We're now attempting to use this approach in guiding medical research and practice. In my early studies and training, you got big fat textbooks, and if it was in the textbook, that's what it said. That was right. Or your distinguished professors or your doctors would say, Paulson, this is the way you do it, this is the way it is, and blah, blah, blah. That's the way we learn. Well, were they always right? No. Were the textbooks always right? No. So now we have a different paradigm. We try to do more what we call evidence-based. Let's look at the evidence for all this stuff that we do. Now, this is a busy slide, but all you need to know is that this is my Journal of Family Practice. So if there's an article in there about anything from treating warts to heart medicine or whatever, you read the article, and then at the end they have the SORT, Strength of Recommendation Taxonomy. And it says at the end, it's an A, recommendation, or B, or a C. If it's an A, based on consistent and good quality patient-oriented evidence. B, recommendation based on inconsistent or limited quality patient evidence. C, recommendations based on consensus, yeah, what a bunch of people think, usual practice, what we've always done, opinion. Yeah, you see? So when we get an article now, we're told this has got some real meat behind it. Because we don't have time as doctors to go back and look at all this stuff. But I'd like somebody to have looked this over and said, this is a good type. So that's in my Journal of Family Practice. This was in the Journal of the American Medical Association just a couple weeks ago, March 17th. This was a big article on the effects of EDTA chelation on cardiovascular events. People have gotten for many, many years, there's a group of places and doctors that think you can get atherosclerosis, clean your arteries out by hooking you up to IVs, put this chelation therapy in, it runs through and it kind of cleans out, like Drano, your arteries. And you go back and you do it again and again, and you do enough of these and it cleans your arteries out. Nobody's really done a big study to check that out. So they have this big study with all these doctors doing it, and they spent $2.5 million on this. They had over 1,000 people, 1,700 people. These group are in the placebo. They're just getting this fake chelation stuff that looks the same color. And these people get this chelation therapy, and then they want to find out what happens to them later. Over 5 years, find out how many strokes, heart attacks, all these different outcomes did they have. People, strokes, heart attacks, have to get a stent again, what happened? So I thought, hey, that's a great study. Now, it would end there, but for this class, at the end, study limitations. So they have to write these in these articles now, which I love it. It says several limitations. First, use a different endpoint. They didn't just use heart attacks, they used heart attacks and strokes and this and this. Well, that's maybe an error, or it makes the study different. Second, unusual high number of patients withdrew. Well, that's a problem. Third, the unblinding of possible explanation for observation that placebo patients were more likely to discontinue therapy. You have to go in and hook up to an IV for 3 hours while they run this stuff through you 40 times over 40 weeks. Well, if you get a little sniff that maybe I'm in the dummy group, are you going to keep doing that? I don't think so. So some way, a whole bunch of these placebo people bailed. That's what's that do to your data? You see? I think that's a pretty good point. Finally, one trial, however large or well conducted, cannot answer all the questions. Accordingly, the results of the study should be viewed as an important but single step on the long path toward better understanding the pathophysiology and therapeutic implications of chelation therapy, but do not provide evidence to support its routine use in clinical practice. So here's this big study, all this stuff, and they said, there's a lot of problems with this study. Don't you be using the study to say that this stuff is good. We never would have had that 5 or 10 years ago. Because you just had a bunch of, this was done by Mayo Clinic or someplace on faith. Evidence-based, so we're really trying to get better in medicine. Francis Bacon, way back in the 1600s, said, the human understanding, when it has once adopted an opinion, draws all things else to support and agree with it. And though there be a greater number and weight of instances to be found on the other side, yet these it either neglects and despises, in order that by this great and pernicious predetermination, the authority of its former conclusions may remain inviolate. They wrote pretty neat back there, didn't they?
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. Columbus and the confirmation bias. Columbus had calculated the approximate distance that he would have to go to get to China and the West Indies. He based that on what they thought the size the world was and how big Asia was. So you do your little map and you go, well, let's see, if I go this many thousand miles, I run into, the world is round, I won't fall off the edge, I run into Asia. So, with that bias, when he landed, he thought he had reached the eastern part of Asia. He and his crew called the natives Indians. Identified fauna and flora as species previously discovered in Asia, although many seemed a little bit different. They weren't quite like the Chinese crab. On his second visit, he was told that gold could be found on Kubanacan. And he's thinking, Kubanacan. He heard this as El Gran Khan, or the Great Khan, who was, as Marco Polo, we'll talk about later, was the emperor over in China at that time. So, see, he's thinking, oh, the Khan, that's where the gold is. And so it went for all 4 voyages. Such is the power of belief. So you've discovered a new place, and you don't even know that you've discovered a new place. Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Well, he tried to get financing from Spain first before Portugal. And they always say Spain, the Queen Isabella wouldn't give him the money because she thought the world was flat. The truth is, she thought the world was bigger. Her scientists thought the world was bigger.
The question was that he first went to Spain to get the financing for his voyage, but in fact, Portugal finally gave it to him. But in Spain, it wasn't because she believed the world was flat and he'd fall off, that she believed that the world was bigger than it was.
Yeah.
And she was right.
Yeah.
She must have been pretty well educated. Darwin. Charles Darwin understood this, the human predilection for reaffirming the status quo. In his autobiography, he noted how quickly he forgot any fact that seemed to contradict his theories. Boy, I just forgot that fact. He therefore made it a golden rule himself to write this information down so that he would not overlook it. Is that the scientific method or not? That's pretty cool. Emotions and rational thinking, an oxymoron. We've seen that many of the biases of thinking are emotionally based. Most of this is explained by the fact that emotional feelings were present during the memory formation, and this emotional information is coded, consciously or unconsciously, with the memory or belief. We receive hits of dopamine, and if positively reinforced, not only cause this pattern to be hardwired, but, as we've seen, can cause release of dopamine or hit in the nucleus accumbens, as we talked about, or the pleasure center. When would we call it now? However, we can also see how other thoughts or beliefs can trigger changes in activity in the anterior insula, the area we talked about associated with pain, disgust, foul odors. That's why some thoughts, such as extreme homophobia, racism, and xenophobias of all kinds, can elicit an almost visceral response in some people. That makes me sick. Ever heard that? Some people? They actually are getting into this part of the brain with that idea that's causing these obnoxious feelings, even odors, smells. So say it doesn't sound right or doesn't smell right, you know, as an intellectual test, actually has some validity. What part of the brain we want to talk about now? The amygdala. That's where the emotions are regulated. In the hippocampus, this is the memory. Gee, they're pretty next to each other, aren't they? So a lot of our memories go through the amygdala and the hippocampus before they get stamped in. So, you see a snake. Your eyes see this. And impulses go back. This is the lower part of our brain. The higher part of our brain, back here. But notice the red goes zoom, 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 zoom. Fight or flight response. You see a snake, you don't got to be time to think about, let's see, is that a coral snake or is that one of them look-alike coral snakes? Let's see, let me count the bands. Let's see, it's red, black, green, no, it's black in between the colors. Oh, jeez. You ain't going to be there. You just won Darwin's Award. So nature has filled it out over all these years to, man, let's make this go fast, right? Likewise, when anything comes, not necessarily a snake, sensory data goes into this part of the brain, the primitive part called the limbic system. And data is sent to the amygdala, and the amygdala quickly decides the threat assessment. Is this something serious? Or, we can hang loose with this. And then, if it's something that doesn't feel much of a threat, it'll send it up to the higher cortex. Or you can think about it, process it. But, what happens if it sees it as a threat? Bam-o, to the unthinking response. You see the snake, what about a concept? What about a concept that is threatening to you? An idea, a thought, something you've been taught years ago. Oh, that's bad. Ooh, we shouldn't talk about that. Oh. That sends right to there. Your brain does not send it up the higher. Let's rationally think about this. It goes zoom. Treat it as a threat and goes to a different part of your brain. So, how do we know if a person is rationally processing or not? Get them in a functional MRI unit, of course. How do I know if any of you are listening to me? Get you in a functional MRI. Well, that's not too practical. You can step back, called mindfulness. We could give a lecture on that. And look at the setting and information being dealt with. Is it emotionally threatening to them? How have they dealt with this issue before? What biases do they probably have that virtually guarantee that their prefrontal cortex, remember the thinking part, will be turned off? Read their body language. Note our wide variation in being able to do this. Books have been written on called emotional intelligence, right? You can be real smart, IQ-wise, but emotionally, you just don't read people or understand. You can't look at them and you don't have a clue what's going on. We all vary in our ability to do this. I think women are a little better on the scale than men, personally, but... And the extreme of this is the autism spectrum. What happens when people get to autism or Asperger's? We call it a spectrum now. They don't have a clue. At the other end, they have no clue on your emotion, your being, whatever. So you see, this is a continuum like other things we've talked about in the course. Some people are on one end, and people are at the other end. Examples, cancer or death discussions. I was with a head psychiatrist from MD Anderson Medical Center in Houston at a conference I was at a month ago in Florida on palliative care. And he had a bunch of us in a group and we were role-playing different scenarios. And one of them was, I'm talking to this patient and they're in the office and they're giving the results of their CAT scan or their MRI and they've got cancer and they come back and they get the results. And so we had people role-play this. And we said, okay, we give you the results and your cancer has come back. It's spread all over. Now, we're going to, but we have things we can do. We have this chemotherapy and this, and we're going to do some radiation, and we're going to do this and this and this and this. He said, okay, what do you think's going on there? What part of your brain is working? This part, no. The amygdala, yes. Once people, the majority of people hear that, cancers come back, their brain goes into the emotional amygdala role. Yeah. You're thinking, how much do I have time to have left? I got to cancel that class reunion. What about my kids? What about my mother? What am I going to do? You're not listening to what this guy is saying is about, oh, the next chemotherapy is going to be this, and then in 2 weeks we're going to do this radiation, right? You tuned that out. You didn't tune it out. Your brain tuned it out on purpose. It's not working on the front part. Discussions about death also are the same way. And the importance of reading body language. In school, we try to do this. That's where I was taught. That you don't need an MRI. You can look at people's body language to see where they're at. Are they working up here, or are they working down in here? Arguing with family members. Ooh, there's one in the class. Here. None of you have ever had argued with family members. Sometimes we get in these arguments, and they're the same arguments, and they come up again and again, and it's like pretty soon everybody's going, and you never get anywhere. Well, now looking back on this, and once you see that emotional response coming up, you might as well say the lights are going out in the front. We're back to the same old emotional thing that's happening. So you might as well just say, well, that was nice, let's go do something else. And it's not going to be productive. Arguing with someone who feels strongly about their political or religious belief. Ever change their mind? Not likely. How many biases, chemical and neurologic, are there to predispose them to a calm, sensible, and rational discussion? We've just gone through all these things that we've had, right? Compare it with the adolescent brain. How many times have you sat down with an adolescent and they want to go and do this or that, and you spend 5 minutes and you tell them all the rational reasons of why it's not in their best interest and all these things. Does the adolescent ever say, gee, Mom or Dad, I never thought about it that way. You make good points. I agree with you 100%. Anybody here ever had that happen? I haven't. Because they're really, we know this part comes slower, even in adolescence. Some people are simply just wired to try to win the argument, no matter what. It's almost like a sporting event because they get adrenaline rush. So they're just kind of, they got to win the argument. Who cares what it is? Why then do people believe and act so irrationally? The argument that they can't handle it. The truth will kill them. We shouldn't take away their religion or belief because it's like a security blanket that they need. We are more worried about what they may think of us. And confronting them may result in negative feelings toward us. And of course, we're taught to avoid that. It's just their defense mechanism. Our egocentric thinking that we have the right insight into the truth and that they are wrong, self-deceived, irrational, and just plain crazy. Have you heard this bias before? So what areas or topics are so hard for us to discuss or have rational debate? Of course, sex, politics, and religion. Now I hope you can see why. Our evolutionary history, our brains, and our present social situations absolutely guarantee it. These are where the emotional biases and the histories of belief are the strongest. Changing health behaviors. Most people, in my experience, would just rather take a pill or do things that they like or avoid doing the things they dislike rather than following evidence-based recommendations. You show them all these facts and you do this, and it's happening. You know, they're not doing that. They're great at rationing why they can or won't follow a clearly beneficial behavior recommendation. Egocentric thinking, I want to believe what I want to believe. So, let's take our thinking toolbox and what we've learned and take a look at the test survey questions again. And I think we want to do that right after break. We want to take a break right now. That's perfect time to take a break. So then we're going to hop in and look at those questions that we originally did and see where we go. Okay? Thank you.
Break seems kind of short, but I know you're eager to get back to hear the last part of the class too. You remember when we had a snowstorm last winter that we had to shuffle our schedule a little bit, and Don Smith was not able to do his Open Wednesday lecture at that time, and so we postponed him until April 10th. And I remember at the time people saying, oh, April 10th is so far away. Well, guess what? It's here next week. And I've asked Don to come and spend a couple of minutes telling you what his courses or his class is going to be about. Don Smith, he's Professor Emeritus of History at Grinnell College, as most of you probably know. And he's going to be talking some history. Don?
Well, thank you. I'm going to talk about Alexis de Tocqueville, whose Democracy in America, how's that? His Democracy in America, I think, is certainly one of the most influential books written about America, and certainly the most influential book about America written by a foreigner. Published in 1835, and then the second part in 1840. It's so famous, it's entered into the kind of realm of activity that JR might be interested in. I wonder if how many people have ever heard the quotation, America is great because America is good, and when America is good, America will cease to be great. That has been attributed by innumerable American politicians, including Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton, to Tocqueville. Tocqueville never said any such thing, and apparently all manner of evidence to the contrary has failed to extinguish it, but anyone who's interested can go to the website, Google, just America Great, America Good, and you can see the history of this. I want to talk about what Tocqueville meant by democracy, what he thought the consequences of democracy would be for America, and importantly for the European world as well, because he thought democracy was an unstoppable force. There was no way to fight it. His observations were the result of a trip he made in 1831 and 1832 with his friend Gustave de Beaumont. They were both young French lawyers. Now, I think what Tocqueville is best known for are the things that he said about what he saw in New England and the Middle Atlantic states. But being a native of Tennessee, I especially wanted to talk about their observations in Tennessee, and particularly about slavery, because there Tocqueville's conclusions take on a somewhat different color. So I'm going to give a good deal of attention to what he had to say about slavery. Now, where they stayed in West Tennessee is a well-known town, but it isn't commemorated there. There's no sign anywhere that Alexis de Tocqueville spent 4 days recovering his health and talking to people. What I set out to do was to get that visit commemorated. So the second part of my talk is going to be about people I met down there, the help I got, and how you go about getting a commemorative marker for something like this put by the side of the road, at least in the state of Tennessee. So that'll be the second part of my talk, and I'll have handouts and that sort of thing. So I hope you will enjoy what I have to say, perhaps learn a little bit.
Thank you. There will be next week. There is no registration required and no fee. This is a treat for us to give to you, and I know you're going to enjoy it. And now, back to JR and Finding the Truth.
Hey, thanks, Joanne. You have a handout on this, if you want to get the lights for me a little bit. So I'm not going to go over it. The problems of sociocentric thinking. Most people do not understand the degree in which they have uncritically internalized the dominant prejudices of their society or culture. Sociologists and anthropologists identify this as a state of being culture-bound. This phenomena is caused by sociocentric thinking. And I'm not going to go through that because you can read that. Aren't our religious beliefs sacrosanct? Not if they spill over into areas or questions that involve claims of reality or truth in the real world. In other words, if they're up in that first group of truths that we talked about, no, they're not off limits. Versus metaphysical or ethical issues which pose different questions and may posit different methods of finding the truth. We talk about what about the metaphysical and then one about the ethical. Conspiracy theory. Which one was it? I'm not going to go over this in detail, but conspiracy theories abound. Why do conspiracy theories abound? Because the pattern filters in these people are wide open. They see patterns where there are no patterns. They make patterns where there are no patterns. Patterns are then married to agency, usually with a malintent. So they see these facts, and then they get some sinister plot, and then they book everything to that. More likely with less feelings of control and a brain predisposition for dopamine. Remember we told you that some people's brains are more subject to this. They've done this. They find people that are believing conspiracy theories all over across the board, and their brains are a little different. why do some of these government ones never pan out? Gordon Liddy said the problem with government conspiracies was that bureaucrats are incompetent and people can't keep their mouths shut. So that summarizes why these big government theories are bumped right off the bat. I think he nailed that one. Did you find conspiracies about Obama? Oh yeah. Look at all of these. They're on the internet. They're all over the place out there. These people with these conspiracies. Just amazing. Is Obama a Muslim? Of course not. What does he profess? Time and time again. Where does he worship? It's only conspiracy theories that try to create a different pattern of reality. They want to believe bias. You just think what you have to do to be born in Kenya, and you think, well, let's see, my kid's going to grow up to be the first black president of the United States 40-some years from now, and I better send his birth certificate over to Hawaii so they thought he was born there. I mean, stuff you can't make this up. This is just, well, you can make it up. That's fine. Who believes this? Believes that Obama is a Muslim. Well, take a look. It's a little different on Democrats and Republicans. College grad, some college, high school. So less people on both sides believe that. But look how it goes up over time here, from March to August. They start out at 10%, but then when? They're way up there. Well, why do you think that is? Well, another question, where do the birthers come from? Demographically, we can take a look. South, Republican. But this is a clue. Instances of birther coverage on Fox News Channel since March. So guess what? Fox News is putting this on all of the time. The birther stuff. What do people then believe? People that watch Fox News tend to be more Republican, right? Correct? Right? That was bad. But you see what's going on here. Remember this slide from before? So that's how science, reality, truism really can cut through some of this political. Or maybe there's something deeper, more sinister going on. Translating the birther conspiracy theorists, what they say, Obama needs to produce his birth certificate. What they really mean, we really hate having a black man in the White House. So there may be what we say at this level, and there may be emotional different level. But let you know, yes, we do have some facts. I did find his official birth certificate online. Isn't that cool? So any of you doubters in here, that's the real birth certificate. Signed by Dr. Mike. Another book that's excellent, The Believing Brain by Michael Shermer. You can learn more about ghosts, God, conspiracy theory, politics. What about UFOs, ESP, aliens, near-death experiences? These also are amenable to rigorous scientific scrutiny. UFOs are easy. We can explain 90%. However, just because we can't explain the others yet, does not make it likely they are of extraterrestrial origin. Unidentified flying object. Think of the word. What's it saying? That they're unidentified. Duh, if they were identified, they wouldn't be unidentified. I mean, that's in our logic part of the truth, remember? This also holds for miracles. Just because we can't explain it doesn't mean it was caused by a supernatural deity or God. I have people that have cancer that they're supposed to die and this is supposed to happen and then get better. Well, okay, they got better, they got cured. Was it a miracle? Definition of miracle. I don't know. It had to do some forces outside. No, maybe we don't understand what happens in spontaneous. Maybe we don't understand the immune system. We don't understand enough about cancer. However, the belief in aliens is deeper and more symbolic of an evolutionary and primitive need. This is cool. A map. You can find out where all the UFO bases are and where tunnels are, portals to away, and also inner Earth entrances.
Oh my goodness.
Take those on your next summer trip. Susan Clancy, in her 2006 book, Abducted, hypothesized that our need to feel less alone in the world and to know that there is something out there is very comforting. We talked about that as agency. That for many people, belief in an alien abduction gratifies a spiritual hunger. It reassures them of their place in the universe and their own significance. That subjective experiences are real to them and may be a variation of post-traumatic stress disorder. These people who think they're abducted, you talk to them, you interview them, they're really believing this stuff. Maybe they have hallucinations. Are real to those experiencing them. I've dealt with many people that have hallucinations. They are real to them. You're not going to talk to them. They have the experience. Oh, you just made that up. You didn't see that person. They did see that person there. They did see that. So it's real. And trying to convince them, logic or otherwise, it's a real experience. Concluded, believers are psychological benefiting. They're happier. This is interesting. They're healthier. They're more optimistic about their lives than people without such belief. Not just in aliens, but also we'll find out in religion. It does make a difference. Religious creeds of all shapes and colors seem to fulfill a basic human need. This is not surprising for pattern-seeking, agent-postulating primates, is it? It'd be weird if we didn't have this. What about SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence? In this case, real science is taking place. The null hypothesis states that there is not extraterrestrial intelligence in the universe, besides us, until one is proven. Belief in aliens is not something that needs to be disproved, as those believers claim. Many working on SETI, I thought was interesting, used to be very religious, but now they're more agnostic now. But they're looking for something else in the universe, just not God on this planet. Michael Crichton said that SETI is unquestionably a religion, noting that faith is defined as the firm belief in something for which there's no proof. They kept telescope in search for other planets. When we started to look for other planets, we didn't know if there were other planets out there. And when I listened to the guy that came down from Iowa State and a lecture, he said, we're putting this telescope, we're going to look for other planets, because we're looking for other life, other intelligences. But we don't know if there's other planets. And what's neat about science is we don't know what we're going to find. We may not find any planets at all. Then our Earth and our solar system will be, we could say, more likely to be unique in the universe. So science, we don't know what we're going to find. We're going with an open mind. And what do they find? Planets all over the place. Exoplanets here, exoplanets there, zillions of planets. Wow. But we did not know that. So that's how science works. UFOs, I want to believe. We have a positive ID on the spacecraft, Mr. Ferguson. Now, if you can identify the one who abducted you, we won't keep you any longer. Okay. What about ESP? Good Science Canon has debunked almost every claim to date. Random chance and statistical analysis explain a lot away. Just like if you roll 5 6s on the dice in a row, or you get a certain cards, that can be random. So I guess, what card am I holding? You can do that a certain amount of times. But when you repeat the experiments done by somebody else in their own laboratory, this stuff goes away. What about magic? If somebody comes up, pulls something up from behind your ear, you go, wow, that's ESP. That's it. No, you go, you went just to a magic show. Think all the stuff that magic people can do. But we don't get off into this extraterrestrial ESP. God did, you see what I mean? Outside nature. We know it's magic. There's a trick. We just don't know the trick. And they're not going to tell us the trick. It's a really good trick, but you see, if we go into magic, we're okay. But when you start slipping into these other extrasensory or out there type explanations, that's when we get into trouble. You're thinking, this is really stupid. People can't read minds. How did you know that? Oh, that's good. Near-death experiences. These are very amenable to scientific scrutiny too. Remember the importance of words. Near-death experience. They didn't say death experience, right? These are not people who died and came back. These are near-death experiences. So think of the verbiage. 15% of revived cardiac arrest patients experience something like this. It's a lot. I've had patients do that. It's often used as evidence for an afterlife, heaven, God, etc. Most share a triad of experiences. You've heard this before. A feeling of floating or flying or often looking down on your own body. Passing through a tunnel or a hallway with a bright light at the end of it. Right? You've heard these accounts? Or third, perhaps seeing a loved one who had already died, or a godlike image. Yes?
Are there recordings of people who have had a near-death experience that went to hell?
Question, are there recordings of people who had a near-death experience and went to hell? The answer is not very many. Which is very interesting, isn't it? In hospice work, I've had some patients who have thought they were going to hell. And it's pretty, excuse me, French, damn scary and horrible. Because they're dying, and they're not thinking they're going that way, they're going this way. And they're hanging on, and they're clawing on, and they're seeing fire, and they're seeing this. And it is real to them. Now, they ended up dying. We did things to help them in the end, but so very rarely do we see that. Okay, are these people really leaving their bodies, or is this just taking place inside their brain? We call the God helmet that we talked about. Remember when they put that helmet on? You got this experience? Or hallucinogenic drugs, the extreme environmental stresses that we talked about, the mountain climbers. Wintery, when testing pilots in a centrifuge, was able to document and recreate the first two experiences at least 1,000 times. He takes these pilots, puts them in a centrifuge, and whips them around, and whoa, that was the tunnel, and there was light, and oh, they weren't near-death experiences, but they had the same experiences. Electrical stimulation of the right angular gyrus in the temporal lobe reproduces the same experience in volunteers. My experience with dying patients, as I mentioned one of them there. I have people that see people before they're going to die, very not uncommonly. They're getting close and they're seeing their father, they're seeing their mother, they're seeing their kid that died before them. That is not uncommon. And when I mean they're seeing them, the hallucination is real to the person experiencing it. Is the person really floating around in the room? Don't think so. Are they in their brain? Yes. In addition, just because we science can't explain everything that the human brain experiences, that's normal. We don't know everything. We're just cutting edge of this neuroscience frontier. So of course, yeah, we can admit, we don't know. We don't know. That's okay to say that. We don't have to enlist extra human entities, however, to explain it. The I want to believe bias. There's an extremely strong bias to want to believe in the afterlife. The theory of agency and the theory of mind that we talked about make this most likely. Most modern tribes and cultures after the Neanderthals buried objects to be used by the departed in the afterlife. That gives us a hint. So you find a tribe and they bury all these things, not just ornaments, things to use. Well, why would you bury things, people that you're going to use, your bow and arrow, if you didn't believe in something after? Neanderthals didn't. That's interesting. Neanderthals, of course, I know. Dualism, that is the separation of the body and the mind, has been a prominent theory which easily leads to the concept of a soul or personal essence that survives after a physical death. So if you think body, mind, body, soul, they're different things. Essence, this dies, this goes on. If you believe in that, then you have a different platform for which to believe. 21 grams, anyone familiar with that experiment? Dr. Duncan McDougall, 2007 in Haverfield, Massachusetts, had people that were going to die. They were just, this guy is looking bad, he's going to die in the next day or two. So he made a special bed, and really sensitive scale that would go down to the grams. And he put the dying patients on them, and what he was going to do was weigh them, and then as soon as they died, he weighed them again. And out of 6 patients, 4 patients lost an average of 21 grams. So that was the weight of the soul. I mean, you see where we're going to go with it. We want to see, was there a physical thing that left the body at this time? Now, it went back and looked at the scales and the methodology, and yeah. But that concept even made a movie on that. So, can science look at God? Yeah. What does science tell us about God? Homo religiosus. Over 84% of the world's population belongs to some form of organized religion. 6 billion of the Earth's inhabitants. 2 billion are Christians, 1 billion Muslim, 850 Hindu, 400 million Buddhists. Pew polls show that 82% of Americans believe in God, 68% of you, 76% in miracles, 40% of you, and 75% in heaven, 43% of you. Who or what God represents varies depending on your religious faith. So a personal God, 91% of Mormons believe in a personal God. Jehovah's Witnesses, 79. Evangelicals, 62. Protestants, 62. And Catholics, 60. God as an impersonal force, not as a personal force. A little over half of Hindus, 50% of Jews, 45% of Buddhists, and 35% of people says, I don't believe in any specific religion. Even 55% of agnostics and 21% of self-proclaimed atheists believe in some kind of, you say, how can they be atheists? Well, they don't believe in a theistic God that comes into the universe and does anything. It just is like designed the universe or the force or whatever. So that's pretty strong evidence that we believe. Harris poll among Americans. You can take a look at that. And I always find it interesting, as you said, heaven always trumps hell. What can we learn from this? The belief in God and religion is clearly ubiquitous for almost all cultures and all epochs. I would posit that this is also hardwired into our brains for a number of reasons. Patternicity, agenticity, evolutionary advantage, neuro and chemical reinforcements, as well as sociologic and cultural regions all interplay to make the belief in God and religion so pervasive and enduring. How can we apply what we've learned in this area? A topic that's often been felt to be off limits for some reason. Yet no other area are our biases both for and against so strong. Now my idea of early man, 10,000 years ago, or in primitive areas now, in Amazonia, gods, pantheism, God is in everything. If the sun comes up, what did we create? A myth of somebody with a chariot that carries the cross. Lightning comes. How did lightning come? Zeus is setting a firebolt. Think of all the everything, animals, plants, all this pantheism. That was the history of most primitive cultures, based on patternicity and agenticity. So science gradually, when it came invented in the 15, 16, 1700s, and with the Age of Enlightenment, started chopping something. No, lightning doesn't come from firebolts set by Zeus. Ben Franklin puts a kite up in the sky, and we get, so that little chunk of religion kind of goes bye-bye. And then other things. So science continually explains these things that religion had once explained. So you see the pattern there, right? Evolution and the social imperative for gods. In Darwin's book, The Descent of Man, he states that belief in an all-prevailing spiritual agency seems to be universal. Yet he couldn't explain by natural selection why this would be beneficial for individuals and their offspring. However, he concluded that it might operate at the tribal level. He said, quote, "There can be no doubt that a tribe including many members who, from possessing a high degree the spirit of patriotism, fidelity, obedience, courage, and sympathy, were always ready to aid one another and would be victorious over most other tribes. And this would be natural selection for the group." God is the ultimate enforcer. Now, I think something happened around 4, 5, 7,000 years ago when we had civilization. There was a big change in what people believed in gods and religion. Now we're in these big communities and groups. The immediate supervision of the chiefs or officials to enforce the laws of the tribe became impossible. There's 500 people in your city or your town or your tribe. You can't police all that. See the beauty and utility of having a God who is invisible, who sees all, knows all, and judges all, which combined with guilt becomes a powerful deterrent of wrongdoing or sin. Add to this the creation of a heaven and a hell to further reinforce the rules and beliefs of the tribe, and you got a powerful mix for social, let alone military, cohesion. To die in martyrdom for guaranteed happiness in heaven for eternity became a belief one could easily die for. And many did and do. Think of the suicide bombers today. Kamikaze in the war. Just had a tank to go out, not enough gas to come back. What about the people who went on the Crusades? Knowing they would probably go to certain death. The concepts of heaven and hell are extremely common throughout all history. We think it's a Christian. No, look at other cultures. They've always had this heaven and hell, reward, punishment in the future is very common. In addition, think of all the examples of chieftains, kings, rulers, and dictators who have cloaked themselves with ecclesiastical powers in addition to their secular power and rule. Politicians know all about this, and historians. You get that cloak on you with religion, it just gives you a double whammy. Behavioral genetics in God. We saw earlier that genetic and chemical differences for believer and non-believers. Remember we saw that? Genetic twin studies, Minnesota, 53 sets of twins. Australia, 3,810. And English twin studies all reached the same conclusion and found similar results. 2 times the religiosity of identical versus fraternal twins. Isn't that interesting? And that's enough numbers to have some validity. Conclusion, genetic accounts for about 55% of the variance in religious attitudes. Genetics, that's a topic. 39% non-shared environment, I'll explain that in a second. 5% non-assigned, they don't know what it is. And only about 3% was attributed to the shared family environment. Cultural transmission by parental teaching. What do we think? We think as parents, we're going to teach our kids, and that's going to infuse them with whatever religious stuff. Nah. That's only a small part. They go off, they do their things. Both the environment, the non-shared environment, they go off to college, they do all this, they're not going to necessarily come out with your same beliefs that you try to teach them. But genetics is really powerful. Of course, genes do not determine which religions one chooses, but rather belief in a supernatural agent's commitment to certain religious practices, combined with personality traits, or respect for authority and traditionalism, are driven by the forces above. Chemistry. Discovery of DRD4, dopamine receptors, gene on the short arm of chromosome 11. We find that there are different variations in this gene. And they first studied people who took high-risk behaviors. And they found, they had more of these genes because they didn't have enough of their own dopamine, so they do all this risky behavior to give them a fix. And they wanted to say, is there anything different in their brains? And they found, by taking DNA samples, that there is. These high-risk people got different genes and chromosomes than the rest of you. Hammer studied 1,000 people scoring high on transcendence, mysticism. They had DNA analysis which showed they had a dopamine-boosting version of this other gene called VMAT2. They made publicity about it and called it, we found the God gene. Well, it doesn't, that was a misnomer, but this role seems to be the reward of beliefs, especially in God, or similar transcendental concepts. In other words, it feels good and is rewarding to believe in God. So remember how many of our other beliefs, what we believe depend to get a dopamine hit or not? Here are people who genetically predisposed to have more dopamine hits, and we know dopamine in belief is out there. Think of all the thousands of hits of dopamine, not only as rewards from Sunday school, church services, gospel readings, etc., but also during meditation and prayer that one believer might receive over a lifetime. Think of the reward of that. Let me get your question over there. If there are over 10,000 religions, which there are over 1,000 gods. What's the chances that your culture's one god is the one true one, and the others, Amun, Re, Apollo, Zeus, Shiva, Thor, are all false? The flood myth, virgin birth myth, resurrection myths, and judgment by God after death are all extremely plentiful and common in other cultures and religions, and many predate your religion's story. So you think your religion came up with this? Yeah, other people have had those ideas long before. Apollonius of Asia Minor. Not long after the crucifixion of Jesus, there rose another Messiah, Apollonius. His followers claimed he was the Son of God, that he was able to walk through closed doors, heal the sick, and cast out demons, and that he raised a dead girl back to life. He was accused of witchcraft, jailed, but later escaped. After he died, his followers claimed he appeared to them and ascended into heaven. The origin of God. Many feel that there is compelling evidence that humans created God and not vice versa. Why is God, or the top God in the pantheon, always male? I'd like you women to think about that. These gods are always, does the God have have a Y chromosome? Does he have testicles? Where do they get the male? I'm serious about that. Think of all the religions. How many of the religions have priests that are women? And not too many. The Catholic Church have a lot of cardinals that chose the Pope. So what I'm saying is a lot of the males are the head of the tribe. The males are going to set up the rules for your religion and what women can do and not do. Do many gods seem to have many male human traits and dispositions? Some of these gods get a little angry. They get a little territorial, a lot of things. If Adam and Eve were created by God and put in the Garden of Eden, according to the Bible, what was the Egyptian version? Many of you have probably not had the Egyptian version. Well, let's hear that. Anybody know the Egyptian explanation of how Adam and Eve came about? Probably not. Let's change your cultural paradigm. The ancient world. In the ancient world, depictions of male masturbation are relatively common. The Egyptians, for example, celebrated masturbation as a process by which the sun god, Atum, created the first Adam and Eve equivalents, Shu and Tefnut. With the hand of God, Atum masturbated and brought forth the first pair of souls.
Oh my word.
So imagine teaching your third grade Sunday school class. Okay, kids, today we're going to talk about creation. But that's what they did. The Sumerians, who invented the first written language, they weren't sluggish. They referenced to the god Enki, masturbating, and his ejaculation filling the Tigris River with water.
Oh, Lord.
Okay? What about us? Condemnation of masturbation is as old as fertility worship, and it's probably based on man's early recognition that there's safety in numbers. A bigger tribe is more likely to gain new territory and expand its power base. In this theory, this is the reason that forms of sexual pleasure unlikely to result in population increases, masturbation, homosexuality, oral anal sex has routinely been denounced as wrong. While in today's overpopulated world, this rationale no longer makes sense. This belief structure continues to drive the moral attitudes of many people. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, it's all based on Genesis 38 in this onism. Onism refused to marry and procreate with his brother's widow, and said he spilled his seed, ejaculate on the ground. Instead, this was the origin of this, which is incorrectly used in place of masturbation. In fact, what really happened was premature withdrawal. 18th and 19th centuries. It was primarily during the 17th and 18th centuries when masturbation was associated with mental and physical deficiencies. Some prominent physicians, scientists, philosophers, leaders believed that problems such as insanity, vision and hearing problems, epilepsy, mental retardation, and general health problems were caused by self-stimulation. In fact, over 60% of medical and mental illnesses were blamed on masturbation. Quick question.
Yes, has there ever been a study where all the religions, how all the religions are alike?
The question is, has there ever been a study of how all the religions are alike? I'd say not specifically, but by the time we're done with this, you should be able to see a lot of parallels in all these religions. The cage. The Handbook of Medicine, 1885, offered a metal cage that could be put around boys' genitals. It would allow erections, which weren't seen as wrong, yet would prevent the boy from touching himself. How would you guys like to get that at your 10th birthday or whatever? Of course, Masters and Johnson and Kinsey report found out, no, it doesn't cause illness. Oh, these beliefs are all wrong. And that finally came out and said that masturbation to be the most common form of sexual activity among humans. But a little slow to change. Today, even though we have medically totally distanced ourselves from these old beliefs, remember Jocelyn Elder? She was fired by President Clinton. In 1994, she said masturbation, something maybe we should be part of. It's part of human sexuality. Let's fire her. You know, our population doesn't want to hear that, right? Even though she's right. Science and religion continued. Remember our 4 categories of truth. Empirical truths. Claimed to be true by any religion, but in the purview of science are amenable to the scientific method. Logical truths. Claimed by many religions can be analyzed for errors in consistency, particularly when they claim their texts to be the divine writings of God. All the consistencies within a book or a text just logically don't make sense. Claiming that a deity is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-good leads to some serious logical questions and quandaries. Question of evil. If God can prevent evil, he's all-powerful, why does evil happen? These have been going on for thousands of years in philosophical discussions. Logically and scientifically, the burden of proof is on the believer to prove God's existence, not on the non-believer to disprove God's existence. I can't prove that Zeus or Thor don't exist, nor can I prove that there's no Easter bunny or tooth fairy. How do I prove there's no tooth fairy? Easter bunny. Now, it's looking like science is pretty much displacing areas firmly in the domain of religion. Is there much left? We've seen how many subjective religious experiences are real, but occur within our brains. And these are becoming more and more explained by neuroscientists. Talking about a God who works outside nature brings up the problem or conclusion. How could science discover God in nature if God is outside of nature? And of course, science could never discover a God that's outside of nature because science works in nature. Likewise, posing the first cause of the universe as being outside of space and time is not satisfying either, which is harder to believe, that the Big Bang just happened or that a superior being or God just happened. To logically just define an entity that needs no creation begs the question. So what else do the naysayers, non-believers, atheists have to say? They'll tell you how horrible, stupid, and infantile these beliefs are. They'll say that more people have been killed and murdered in the name of religion than all the other wars and disasters combined. And they'll be right. They were probably once deceived or a member of a fundamentalist group or church until they saw the light. They think that those folks that believe are just as afraid to see the truth and face reality, etc. Have you seen a pattern here of bias, or 2 or 3? So people that are at this other end are looking at all this and just kind of piling on. They're filling it through their biases. Remember the intersecting circles. So science takes up a lot of that space, but there's still a bunch left that is religion. So what's left is plenty. I'm going to go about 5 more minutes. Science, as powerful a method that it is, should not be and cannot help us in the area and domain of values. Science cannot deal with words like ought and should. What should we value in ourselves and in others? What standards of morality should we adhere to? What values should our political leaders follow? What's worth going to war for? How should we spend our finite and limited resources? What crimes, if any, should bring the death penalty? What about abortion? And just as importantly, what should we use our scientific advances for? How to use our nuclear knowledge, stem cell use, cloning, euthanasia, gene manipulation, space exploration, etc. All demand an answer. Not choosing, however, is an option that could cause major negative world consequences. The separation of church and state was a crowning achievement for America and should be continued. But moral decisions still need to be made, and fortunately or unfortunately, will often be made on the basis of one's religious values. That's why it's so important to be aware of all of our biases, especially those based on sociocentric thinking and egocentric thinking. Lastly, science cannot deal with the existential questions of existence, such as, why am I here? What is the meaning of life? What do I want to accomplish in my life? What will happen to me after I die? What are my values? In my experience as a doctor, spirituality is an extremely important component for good total health and is critical in my work with hospice and end-of-life care. We do not attempt to change or challenge a person's belief, but try to bolster and strengthen them in as many ways as possible. Whether we think the beliefs are true, irrational, or seem way out is of no concern if in the end they comfort the patient and or their family. Our intellectual and moral humility demanding. Who says science can't study faith? I invited this author, Harold Koenig from Duke University, to Rosenfield Symposium about 12 years ago. And he did powerful work here. Science explores the last great frontier. Dr. Koenig has eloquently summarized the large body of scientific evidence demonstrating the important role of religion and spirituality in health and mental illness. More importantly, he brings this information home by skillfully telling stories of the importance of faith for real people and families. Great little book. I think I gave Harold this, and it's good for the cynics. Mitch album, Have a Little Faith. He goes back to Detroit where he's from. The Jewish, his rabbi said, hey, I want you to do the eulogy for me when I die. And like he's left the faith in me. I said, what do you mean? And it goes on from there. And it's just really a great little story. So faith, okay? Yes. But with a very important caveat. Blind faith, no. Too often religions are hijacked by an often radical and sometimes militant wing or leader. Blind faith and allegiance can be an easy and slippery slope. It's great to have all your decisions, choices, and values predetermined. To follow blindly requires the least effort, as we have seen, and you get lots of chemical rewards for it. That's why even faith requires critical thinking skills and courage to espouse your opinion against the probable majority. Remember the Gandhi quote. Eric Hoffer, in his brilliant book, shows how complete allegiance to a religion, a political movement, or an idea can lead to disastrous consequences. Reinforcing the theme, truth does matter. Highly recommend the Eric Hoffer book. God is in control. That's nice, but what responsibility do I have? And who interprets what God really wants? And how to deal with others with a different thinking style. I'm going to have to zip through this really fast. Basically, you try to find out what is their style. What's their thinking style, if you can. So some people are analytical. They're left brain, facts are paramount. I want to see the data for immunization so I can make a decision. So give them the data. Other people are denialists, disbelievers. They don't accept anything you're going to say despite overwhelming evidence. Provide consistent messages. Don't try to hard sell them. It ain't going to work. Some people are numerous. They don't understand statistics. They think 1 in a million. That sounds high. Provide them with real mathematical knowledge. So find out what kind of maybe heuristic they're working on. Highly effective people, 7 habits. Stephen Covey is great. I talked about this in the first lecture. In the first course, habit 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Most of us pile right in and we want to tell them our side of the story and how they're wrong. No, Covey says, no, we don't want that. You go the other way around. Listen to what they have. And synergize means the end result is greater than simply the sum of the parts. Others contribute a piece or view of reality that you don't have received. Example, perhaps your left brain and their right brain. Won't your points of view be complementary? So my thesis is, other people understanding, listening to them, they can show perspective and things that we don't have. Levels of communication. When you do this, and don't set it up as I win, you lose, I win, but as a win-win, that builds trust and cooperation. And boy, do we need that in Washington. Besides, you both together are probably closer to the truth, whatever that means. Maybe that requires you to change your mind, but that's okay. Summary, what can we do? First suggestion, teach critical thinking in schools, especially high school and college. The internet and the tremendous flood of information makes this imperative. All this knowledge is out there. Nobody knows what the heck to do with it. It's all out there. Yeah, you can come on your iPhone and come all this stuff, but how do you look at that and filter out what's true and not? Teach the real scientific method. They found out a National Science Foundation study that less than 30% of our schools actually teach the scientific method. They teach facts, you learn all these facts, but they don't really teach the scientific method. Recognize that new research shows that the brain can change itself. We can't change our genetics or past experiences, but we can do much, to a much larger degree than ever thought, rewire our brains. Meditation can do it. Exercise can change the chemical balance of neurotransmitters. Cognitive and psychotherapy can change your brain wiring. We know this now. Brains can repair from previous damage. Lastly, becoming a skilled, critical thinker requires time, introspection, mindfulness, and practice. Hopefully this class and reading some of the references will stimulate you to think about your thinking. Finally, what can we do better interacting with others? This book, The Brain That Changes Itself by Norman Doig, is also highly recommended. So what have we learned? I gave you a whole handout on those, hopefully things that you've learned. In summary, my 3 take-home points can be even summarized more simply as be skeptical, be open-minded, and be humble in your thinking. You've also has a handout on intellectual virtues that you probably haven't thought about. Intellectual courage, humility. I've got those written down for you. The essential intellectual truths. Schirmer summarizes it nicely. The scientific principle that a claim is untrue and shall prove otherwise runs counter to our natural tendency to accept as true that which can be comprehended quickly. Thus it is that we should reward skepticism and disbelief and champion those willing to change their minds in the teeth of new evidence. However, he goes on to say, instead, most social institutions, most notably those in religion, politics, and economics, reward belief in the doctrines of the faith or party ideology, punish those who challenge the authority of the leaders, and discourage uncertainty and especially skepticism. Is that true? Quote from Carl Sagan, which I'm not going to do. So let us end with the 2 quotes that I used for my first class from the Tao Te Ching. Truth is not always beautiful, nor beautiful words the truth. And when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. So I hope that these classes have given you something to think about. And thanks for listening. And anything out of it, you learn how to kill a banana.
Unfortunately, we have a time limit. Oh, thank you. A little thank you, of course. We have a card signed by all the members of the class. Hoping you'll remember us, we'll certainly remember you. Our card is, on the front is a little cartoon that I think you'll appreciate. These 2 little animals are talking to each other, and one says, let's go on a quest. To find what? Truth. Oh, I already found some behind the couch. And here's a poem. I had to write a poem in honor of your wonderful class. How to get a full bucket course class. There's a way to get a mob to sign up for a course. Just ask JR to be on board. He's such a gifted source. We're never disappointed as we know that he will give the whole class something valuable, some thoughts on how to live. It does seem so appropriate because no one can doubt he knows so much about us all, both sight and inside out. We lead each class with knowledge that gives us new insights in how to live a worthy life in coming days and nights. This class on truth is challenging. It does so aid our minds in helping us recognize the truth of many kinds. It isn't due to Medicare that we are here to learn. It's because our brains need looking at. So to our doc we turn. Thanks so much for seeing us, not through a stethoscope, but here with all our clothes on and helping us to cope. Thank you. Oh, remember this, I'm going to pour over the information you left us over and over. Oh, yeah,
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you, JR. I'm sorry we ran a few minutes past, but I don't think you minded very much. Please remember to fill out the forms that you have and leave them on your table. The registration form for George's course and also the comment sheet. If you're interested in purchasing a DVD for JR's course, you see Jack at the table in the hallway. They are $3 per class. And $3 per class. They're worth $33 per class. You can have them for $3. And you need to pay him when you sign up for it. and he will get the DVD made for you. You can pick them up next week or at the library during the week next week. So thank you for coming. We'll hope to see you all back next week for our Open Wednesday course with Don Smith. Thank you for spending your morning with us.
Truth